Ukrainian F-16s have officially entered the fight amid what's being called the largest Russian air attack of the war thus far. On Monday night, Russia launched a massive air assault on Ukrainian targets all across the nation, mostly related to the Ukrainian electrical grid. This attack included some 127 cruise and ballistic missiles of various sorts, and another 109 long-range one-way attack drones. And according to Ukrainian officials, they did a pretty effective job of intercepting these weapons, with a claimed 102 out of 127 missiles downed, and another 99 out of 109 drones taken out. And among those aerial victories were reportedly several cruise missiles taken down by Ukraine's new F-16s. Now, we don't know how many F-16s participated in this defensive effort, or even specifically what types of weapons they shot down. But based on the flight profile of Russian ballistic missiles like the Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile and Kinzhal air-launched ballistic missile, it's very unlikely these F-16s played a role in stopping those weapons. Instead, it's much more likely that these F-16s played a part in taking down the bevy of surface and air-launched cruise missiles that Russia threw into Ukraine on Monday night. You see, cruise missiles like Russia's Kh-101, 3M-14, or Kh-59 operate a lot more like tactical aircraft than like ballistic missiles. They're powered by air-breathing jet engines, usually turbojets, not unlike older fighters like the F-5 Tiger II, and can usually achieve high subsonic speeds, but can occasionally even reach supersonic ones, like Russia's Kh-22, which is an air-launched anti-ship cruise missile that Russia has been using to engage ground targets inside Ukraine. Now, because these weapons fly under turbojet power, their trajectory is usually at a lower altitude and much more horizontal than a ballistic missile's would, and that makes them much more difficult to detect as they approach, thanks to their ability to hide behind the curvature of the earth and even the terrain. But with most of these weapons topping out at between 600 and 700 miles per hour, and no really appreciable means of defending themselves against a fighter jet, they actually make for pretty easy prey for platforms like the F-16. And when we saw Ukraine's F-16s first revealed to the public just a few weeks ago, they were in fact carrying an air-to-air loadout, which I posited at the time suggested that they were going to be used first as air defense assets before moving on to support ground operations. Now, in our first glimpses of Ukraine's F-16s, they appeared to be carrying older AIM-120B or Bravo AMRAAMs, advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles, as well as AIM-9M and AIM-9L Sidewinder infrared-guided air-to-air missiles. And these weapons are both pretty well suited for engaging cruise missiles, but in this circumstance, it was likely variants of the AIM-9 Sidewinder used to down these missiles. And that is specifically because the Sidewinder is a less expensive weapon, and it's certainly capable of taking down a cruise missile. Now, the AIM-9L is a much older weapon. It first entered service in 1977, and the AIM-9M is an updated iteration of the same, which joined the fight in 1991, scoring 10 air-to-air kills in Operation Desert Storm. Now, these are short-range infrared-guided weapons, with the AIM-9M really not being much good outside of 10 miles, meaning these F-16s had to close to within pretty close quarters of these cruise missiles in order to engage them. And that means it's at least feasible that the F-16s may have even used their M61 Vulcan 20mm rotary cannon to take down these missiles. But to be honest, I find that pretty unlikely. You see, while the M61 Vulcan is an incredible weapon, this 6-barrel rotary cannon can fire 6,000 of these huge 20mm rounds per minute. That's 100 of these per second. But the M61 is usually only used within 1,000 to 2,000 feet of your target, and we're talking about engaging cruise missiles that are carrying 1,000-plus pound high-explosive blast fragmentation warheads. Meaning if you were to shoot that laser beam of 20mm rounds at this weapon, there's a solid chance that the debris cloud produced by the exploding cruise missile could actually damage the F-16 engagement. engaging it. And that's why I think it's much more likely that these engagements took place at 1 to 3 or maybe 5 miles out using Sidewinder missiles. Especially because while these AIM-9L and M variants are nowhere near as capable as the most modern AIM-9Xs, they are still capable of high off-bore sight targeting, meaning Ukrainian F-16 pilots could actually target those cruise missiles without having to orient the nose of the aircraft directly at them. They can just use their line of sight to lock on to that target. But it is always possible that Ukrainian pilots opted to keep their distance and try out that AIM-120B AMRAAM. Now, the AIM-120B is also a fairly dated weapon and nowhere near as capable as the latest and greatest AMRAAMs in the American inventory, but it is nonetheless a very capable weapon. This radar-guided air-to-air missile can probably take down targets from outside of 40 miles in the best of circumstances, and certainly could engage 13,000-pound cruise missiles like Russia's Kh-22. But these weapons are much more expensive, and the further away from a target you are upon launch, the greater the chances there are for a miss, and you don't want to waste these missiles. And again, that's why I think it's most likely that Ukraine's F-16s were using Sidewinders for the job, the same way US Navy Super Hornets were taking down cruise missiles over the Red Sea with a very similar weapon system earlier this year. Now, details about the F-16s that participated in this effort, including where they're based out of, are minimal and are likely to stay that way, as F-16s require pretty long, well-manicured runways that could make for easy targets for Russian long-range attacks. And as such, Ukraine needs to keep the actual locations of these aircraft pretty close to the chest. But as always, as new details do emerge, you can find updates on Sandboxx News.